It's these vibrations which your brain interprets as sound.
That's me, Diamond Matrix. I'm trying to resolve the chat room queue. So he's there. John is in the chat room. John C. Sweet. His name is not in the chat queue like yours is, but shows up in the chat dialogue. Anyway, I'm just dealing with blog talk just to find out how somebody can be in the chat room and not show up on the right-hand side in the chat queue. And you'll see John C. Sweet, the red name there, that's John, who's one of the admins for Blog Talk Radio. Yes. Robert Dumbbell. Did he leave? So he might have just been there and left. So that's a possibility. It was this show. Hold on. So let's see. Okay. Well, whatever. Whatever he's there, I will send you a copy. Whatever he is there, I will send you a copy later. Thank you. Okay, let's get on with this. Okay, so back to the show. So where was I before we got into this Robert Dumbbell thing? Which is unfortunate. Let's see So to upgrade your .com, so the price for having a .com URL is going up. I mean, why is that? Why is the price of having a .com URL going up? It's just space. It's all it is. It's just a placeholder, a virtual placeholder, and they're charging more money. Oh, President. Oh, thank you, Gemini Son. President. All right. Before the Robert Dumbbell experience happened. Let's see. So we have Herman Cain. He's out of the picture. Obama. I think he's on the fence. Hillary Clinton, very likely. Just in case they decide to stay Democrat, I think she is a very strong potential candidate, and there's workarounds with getting her in. And then I think it really comes down to Gingrich. I think Gingrich is going to be the guy. I hate to say that. I hate to, and the reason why I think he'll be the guy is because, well, first of all, I think some conservatives actually believe in Newt Gingrich. If you take into account that the vote counts, that there is a quote-unquote older vote that is tired of younger candidates. Like the older vote helped put Barack Obama into the White House. And in their eyes, he's a younger candidate. And he did not hold the same values as the older voters wanted him to maintain. So it's doubtful that they would want to support another young candidate. And Gingrich is at the other end of the spectrum. Certainly, he is older. I mean, what is he? He's like almost 70s, in his late 60s. So I think the older vote, if the vote does count, will rally behind Gingrich. He says he's a Gemini, so he'll shift his position enough to get you to think that was his position all along. I think he's got that ability. He'll, like recently he just said that life does not start at conception, and then he backtracked and he says life does start. And the way he does it, though, it's like he's there's a way in which these people can master this. Well, this is really what I thought all along, and this was really something that I was, exploring in the moment. But if you drill down and you go back to what I said here, what I said here, what I said here, this is what I was really meaning. And now you're lost in the subjective fog of, their version of truth. So anyway, I think Gingrich is probably going to be the guy. The other possibility is that there is no election, and I've talked about that before, and that is a distinct possibility. But Gingrich is a problem. He's a real problem. He's essentially kind of a techno-fascist, to be honest with you. One of his inspirations is the futurist Alvin Toffler, and Toffler has some interesting ideas, but it's like Alvin Toffler, Ray Kurzweil, transhumanism, synthetic sentience, slave race, all that stuff. So I think that Gingrich could be the next boot on the heel if he's elected. And with the Jupiter and Gemini in 2012, I think that there's a strong chance that at least astrologically he can be elected. But anyway, I think if the elections did count, that I would support Ron Paul just because he's different than everybody else. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, doesn't it? Just because he's different. Okay, it's 10:38 here in sunny and windy California. It's kind of cold here too. We're definitely in the winter zone of the climate. This Friday on the Friday show, I'm going to have George Green, and I first met George Green back in 1990 when I was living in Olympia, Washington. It was a time where I was going through like a pretty intense awakening, and lots of wild stuff was happening in terms of syncs, and it was just like this window to a quantum universe had opened up for me. And part of it were these very accelerated moments of bursts of knowledge. And George provided one of those accelerated moments. During that time, he had a seminar at a local hotel, which I went to, and the room was filled with about 200 people. It was a pretty good hall. He had newsletters, and at that time it was cassette tapes. He might have had some videos as well that he was selling, but I think it was mostly newsletters and cassette tapes. And his wife was there with him, and they were giving a presentation. And I remember sitting next to this guy who looked like your typical geek. He was a little more buffed than a geek, but he was definitely had that geeky vibe. And he had one of these big cups of coffee, one of the thermal cups, right? And he was drinking out of it all night, and glasses, he had thick glasses on. And we're dialoguing while George Green was talking about what's going on politically, what was happening with the robotoids and stuff like that. And he told me that he had been recruited to be a part of Delta Forces. I'm like, really? And he said, yep. And then he told me that how he got there was that he was on a game show as a child. I think it was called Quiz Kids or something like that. And they spotted him on this game show, and they recruited him. And they brought him in, and he trained him. And then he tells me that he's been to the future. I'm like, this is interesting. And he's dead serious, he's dead serious. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I've been to the future. So what was that like? And he says, well, don't worry about it. The good guys win. I'm like, okay. And at one point, we were standing around after George had given his talk, and we're just hanging out. We're talking for a little bit. And he says, you see that guy over there? I said, yeah. He said, he's CIA. I said, really? Why? He said, well, you can tell by the way he's blinking his eyes. I said, okay. So they're trained. They have photographic memories. And right now, he's taking in everybody's face. He's trained to do this. and then he'll report back, and he'll give a very detailed description of who was in the room and renderings and everything. Really? I said, yep, I can tell you that right now. That's fascinating. So anyway, I met a guy who'd been in the future and basically said the good guys win. So if you've had any doubts about where all this is going, just dispel them right now, because I know the good guys win. The other weird thing about that time with George was he was talking about the whole, and I've said this before, I told the story before, about the whole Robotoid thing. And he said that Bush had been replaced, which I had thought, by the way, because I'd seen like some other version of George Bush during the Gulf War. It was like a stranger version. It was a less emotional, less personal version. It was much more detached and it was weird. I'm like, what's going on with Bush? And I thought he was doing everything he needed to do right now. And all of a sudden he was like, wasn't very human. I mean, not like he was human before, but he had emotion. And then there was none. I'm like, wow, this is really strange. So when I was driving to California, I think it might have been about 2 months later, that's when George Bush went face down into a plate of food in Japan, when he was over in Japan. Some of you might remember that. And I was with my girlfriend at the time. We were traveling back down to California, and we both looked at each other. We said, the robot had expired. And to me, that was, and I heard about that on Art Bell. And Art was not into the conspiracy game yet. He was just reporting the news and being a kind of a conservative overnight talk show host. That's where Art got his start. So anyway, that was my connection with George Green, and he'll be on the show on Friday, and he's absolutely fascinating. It will be great radio. It will be riveting radio, and hopefully we'll get a sense as to where this is all going. George also, we're going to talk about this, was the publisher of a series of books called Handbook for the New Paradigm, and we'll talk about that and how that impacted people. And and we'll find out. And there were a number of copies of that book. There are a number of editions, and we're going to find out maybe where that came from and where that headed. I remember when that book got sent to me when I was at Monda 2000, just showed up one day, and it was riveting. It was absolutely riveting. It became kind of a mini Bible for me during that time. It was a channeled work, and it was utterly fascinating. So we'll talk to you about that. Speaking of channeled, I've had some weird stuff happen around my house lately. And so when I studied with Karen Lundegaard, the trance medium, she was, how she would work, her world was snaps, crackles, and pops, right? Like, she would essentially go into a trance, and then the house would creak and do all kinds of things. And the house became like this living affirmation of this ectoplasmic energy that was being transferred into the moment so that she could interpret it and then share it with me. It was fascinating. I'd sit in a room and the house would just be, do all kinds of stuff, creaks and pops. And I was like, wow. So she would also take on physical characteristics of people that she would quote unquote channel. But I remembered how the house could actually talk to you.